And now we come to our last session for the day, Mapping Arts Education, Past, Present and Future. Please join me in welcoming co-founder ArtLinks Learning and member of the FICCI Tourism and Culture Committee, Sadhana Rao. And founder and chairperson of Avid Learning, Mrs. Madhu Ruia. Please, the stage is yours.
Good evening. Welcome to this last panel. In some ways, I think this is a fitting finale to a conclave on mapping education. Quest for learning, seeking knowledge, has been a human endeavor since ceaseless and constant. Any normal human brain which houses the mind has a natural propensity to seek learning, to want to learn. If we look at civilizational history, say in the last 150 years, we've seen great art, outpourings of poetry and literature that have stood the test of time, geopolitical tensions which led to world wars, country formations, the Great Depression, great recessions, subsequent economic recovery, great advancements in technology, banking systems, innovation. The mainstay of all this human activity, which makes life and living continue, is education. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, I have a very, very easy task. Civilizational history of education, past, present, and future, I have to decode. Elementary, isn't it? So what I'm going to do in the next 10 to 15 minutes is to make a case for the multidisciplinary approach to education, the foundational concepts of education, how they work, and I will be then in conversation with Mrs. Madhu Ruia, Avid Learning, Learning Never Stops. If you take a look at this slide, it almost reads like a word cloud of the various disciplines and canvas that populate the educational world. I make a strong case for arts education and a strong case for multidisciplinary approach to learning. This form of study, primarily the two reasons are: one, all subjects are deeply interconnected. Secondly, it gives you and gives the learner a comprehensive understanding, encourages critical thinking that would not be possible if the subjects are learnt in silos. Let me speak about the Indian ecosystem. There is all stakeholders, schools, educational and higher institutions of education, parents, all overtly focus on an acronym called STEM: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If to STEM we give a little energy by morphing the word to STEAM, inclusion of arts, the entire circle, the entire paradigm sort of changes. Let me draw a connection between how interrelated the subjects are. Albert Einstein was once asked, how did he formulate the theory of relativity? He gave a very informed and a deep answer. The answer was that I did deep research, I did deep study, but I did deep study of sciences and of music. And the final formation of the theory came from deep intuition, and the driving force was music. Now, Einstein's go-to composers were Bach and Mozart. And both these composers had an amazing simplicity in their compositional architecture. They defined the word simplicity because what is abundant sophistication? It is simplicity. The form of beauty that Einstein saw in their musical compositions is what he wanted in his theory of relativity. Let me expand on that. Mozart in his orchestral compositions, was a master of dialogues. He wrote intimate and intricate musical themes for one instrument to speak to another instrument. If you see his works, his score sheets, which are available in a couple of museums and research institutes, the product that he writes on his score sheets, after so many years, you see, he writes a finished product in his mind. There are very few errors to his work. So that was one inspiration. Bach writes a compositional architecture which has piercing tenderness. He's in fact called the feminine composer. This is on one side. On the second side, to the compositions of Bach, you have ability in music. There's a term called counterpoint, and there's harmony. He brings both together to make this magnificent impact that lets you miss the point. It is these two forms of Bach and Mozart which Albert Einstein says helped him write his theory of relativity. And this is a fact attested by all his biographers. A more recent case, the first woman director of CERN Institute, Dr. Fabiola Gianovotti. You would think a director at CERN, Switzerland, she would have spent all her time cramming molecular biology, cramming subjects which were scientific temperament in mind. She's a particle physicist from Milano University. But before she reached there, her mother was in fine arts and her father was a geologist. She trained, her first educational qualification was that of a pianist from Milano University. She wanted to be a trained classical pianist, then went on to study philosophy and finally found her way to physics. Both these scientists gave a lot of credence to the fundamental, foundational plinth that was their education. Now, these are two individuals who left fine arts or performing arts and went to the sciences. Let me flip the argument. Tchaikovsky, the famous Russian composer, was a lawyer, was writing legal briefs in a firm. His work was so detailed, enormous amounts of legal texts, he had to make briefs. But music was his calling. He went on to become one of the finest classical ballet composers. His orchestral formations, because he thinks in ballet, are extremely picturesque and dramatic harmonies. He attributes his teaching in law to his success and his career as a composer. With these three examples, I'm going to rest my case for being a firm advocacy of multidisciplinary approach to education with an inclusion of arts education, and not what happens right now when all the stakeholders, the first line of casualty are art classes, the first line of casualty in budgetary cuts are the salaries of art teachers. A big shout out to the team at Avid. This is my area of work, curriculum, pedagogy, and they wanted its inclusion. So big shout out to them that in this time and day that we are having conversations. At a very simplistic level, what is pedagogy? Has its origins in the Greek language. Pedagogy is all about the teacher. It's the art of it's the art of teaching. It's the subject as much as the way the teacher internalizes it and is able to put it forth. Curriculum is a course designed to teach students. These are curriculum has its origins in Latin. Both the words curriculum and pedagogy allude to a very informed and a well thought through umbrella word, education. What is education? It's an amalgamation of a few Latin words, the sum, the part, both are equally important. It's derived from educere, which means to care, to nourish, educere, which means to lead forward, educo, which means, educere is to bring forth, educo is to lead forward, educatum is to teach, the instruction of teaching. This is what composes the word education, from which pedagogy, curriculum sort of are given birth. From a macro level, the essence of pedagogy is, one, pedagogy is teacher-driven, curriculum is driven by students. I won't go into the science of, there are various approaches to pedagogy. I mean, that could take an entire conference, but basically it amounts to, there are various approaches like constructivism, which would be a master jeweler knows with 50 to 60 years of experience how an emerald will cut, how a ruby will cut. So that would be constructive pedagogy. Whereas a collaborative pedagogy could be when you're in your PhD level, where the student has that much of learning and can join hands with the teacher. Curriculum refers to the classroom, the set of textbooks. It could be open-ended, it could be close-ended, it could be in a community, it could be project-led. Both these terms are not static. They evolve as society progresses. They both India has a very rich tradition, which is the oral tradition, which is the reason why we have podcasts today. How did podcasts come? Because there is an orality to our entire narrative of the performing arts. Let me give you a quick instance of how pedagogy and curriculum have sort of panned out. The Natya Shastra, I would think, is one of the best examples of pedagogy that meets curriculum. The text is dated to be about 2,500 years ago. It's still the go-to textbook, about 36 chapters, very clearly detailed. In its 33rd chapter, there is actually a very, very elaborate detailing of a term called kutupa. What does kutupa refer to? It's an orchestral formation. 2,500 years back, Bharat Muni, to whom the compilation is attributed, has sat down and given you the formations of an orchestra. Minimum 15 to 20 people. Must have 6 to 7 women, gender diversity. The musical instruments, you must have a string section, you must have a percussion section, you must have a wind instrument section. How should the male and the female performers sit? How should the stage formation be? This is 2,500 years back. The pedagogy worked. What happened? Somewhere down the line, pedagogy meets prejudice. Somebody decided men and women cannot inhabit the stage together. Women were removed. So if you see a data that we have right now in the way we understand would be about, say, 500 years back. It's recorded. So up till, actually they say the antiquities was really modern. There's a whole school of thought in Chennai today which actually argues when you say 2,500 years back is ancient, because if you look at the Sangam poetry and the Sangam literature, it's full of sensuality, which in today's day and age you will be edited out, right? You will be censored. If I take Punjab, who decided that a harvest dance, a dance of exuberance, which is the Bhangra, will be performed by men, and if women want to dance, they will do the Gidda. These are boundaries that have been created as society went into shades of conservatism. This is how a learning cycle looks between pedagogy and curriculum. It's a cycle. As you have a heartbeat, as you have a movement, pedagogy is formed, curriculum is established, the curriculum is panned out, the curriculum feedback goes to the pedagogy. Let me take an interesting example of a dance form, the Bharatnatyam. Refer back to the Natya Shastra. The Natya Shastra gives you a detailed account of the dance Bharatnatyam. It was called Sadir in the olden days. The dance form was for Devadasi women. Who were the Devadasis? They were, because of poverty, because of societal convention, these were women who would dance for the gods in the temple. They were actually extremely talented, extremely graceful, extremely knowledgeable, but as society progressed, sexual exploitation and a whole lot of ills came into the being. Patronage in the Devdasi system did not work to its advantage. However, the dance form sort of stormed the practitioners. Now, it's extremely detailed. It can read like a blueprint and has stayed constant. So you have a system called the Nitta, which is the rhythmic aspect of the dance. Has all the hand movements, have all the leg movements, the primary limbs, how they would move. You have the Natya, which is the Abhinay. Combined together, it becomes Nritya. And as times went on, it was Rukmani Arundale and other theorists who decided this cannot be a form only for the Devdasis. The entire art form got sanitized. And then you had the Kalakshetra style of dance, you had the Melattur, you had the Pandanallur. The dance form, the pedagogy was one, but it gave rise to a curriculum and an art form that went far beyond what it was conceived as. If there is a negative connotation to Bharatnatyam today, it is only that when you present yourself, when you've learnt with a guru or a teacher, the final and the first dance performance is called the Arangetram. Typically, the Arangetram in earlier days would be 6 years, 7 years. So today, a school like Kalakshetra, where you have Leela Samson or Priyadarshini Govind, their students will never do an Arangetram without 7 years. You have, like I think somebody in the morning spoke about a dance school, you can buy yourself an Arangetram today. In 6 months, you can have your Arangetram certificate. So I think that is, pedagogy is intact. It's the curriculum that went a little offbeat. What do we strive as educationists? It is the golden mean between pedagogy and between curriculum. Some of the pedagogy is in the oral tradition, as I said. Some of the curriculum is in the oral tradition. In my growing up years, I learned music from Girja Devi. And her nuances to a Ragkari Geet was so deep that she herself would forget. And what she would tell me on day 1, by day 12, when I think I'm completing my course or what I'm completing my 2-week cycle, she would give me something so revolutionary that I would have to extend my stay with Girja Devi. That was in the oral tradition. Where has the golden mean achieved? Yes, it has. I took the example of Girja Devi. Let me take another musician, M.S. Subbulakshmi. She defied all odds. She arrived at her mother was from the Devdasi tradition, which means she's on the wrong side of caste. She storms this entirely Brahmin destination. Music Academy, which has never given a prime-time performance, Music Academy in Chennai, has never given a prime-time performance to anybody who does not have 8 to 10 years of experience, allows for M.S. Subbulakshmi to come on stage. She has defied every obstacle, learnt every nuance of Carnatic music, learnt every nuance of Hindustani music. Very few people know that she was an accomplished piano player. And she goes on to sing every form of the song, be it the kriti, be it the bhajan, be it a ghazal, be it a nazam, every form of song. I'll conclude with a few more examples. Isaac Newton, while we all know, the world knows him for gravity and his laws on gravity, was so inspired by the symbiotic connection between color and music. He, in his private study, draws a parallel between the 7 notes of music and the 7 colors of the rainbow. As he develops his postulate, he draws inferences from the postulate of reflection, refraction, and dispersion. When it's a reflection, it stays true to its form. When it is refraction, the shape gets altered. When it is dispersion, depends on the velocity and the speed. It can give birth to a new form. Here, that is what is pedagogies. Regarding curriculum, I'm sure all of us know Steve Jobs. At Reed's University, he studied calligraphy and typography. He didn't know what the curriculum was. He was immersed in his class, and when he thought he had learned enough, he drops out. What does he do? He takes calligraphy and he takes the knowledge of that typography, and we all know he goes on to revolutionize the entire computer industry with that knowledge. J.K. Rowling, she didn't study literature. At Exeter University, she studied classics and French and Latin. This bilingual study gave her the ability to think of complex narratives in her mind, to think of literary techniques in other languages other than what she called her own. And she created this, good or bad, that's not the judgment here. But the fact is, it was the interconnectedness of the subjects, it was the golden mean between pedagogy and curriculum. I end on a hope that education was a privilege. I think in our lifetime as educationists, we have seen that today education is a right, and we should give ourselves a big cheer for that. I will now be in conversation with Mrs. Ruia.
Thank you, Sadhana. That was an amazing analysis and talk on arts and education. And, Sadhana is a research-led art and expert and a curator. And she started something called Art Links Learning, which teaches children from the age of 2.5 to 16 and above, and also teaches teachers how to teach. So what made you start this Art Links education?
So it was a need that was felt by the community, one. It was a burning passion in us because as I was growing up, I'm completely sure that I was dyslexic in maths. But these questions were never addressed when we were growing up. I grew up in small town India. My father was with the armed forces. The only thing that kept me going was I gravitated towards all forms of music, and I would think, how do I get the complex permutations and combinations in music or in dance? And I don't get it in maths. So I would look at that ability of which I sort of self-taught myself. I'd like to give a lot of credit to an organization called FICCI, a Society for Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture amongst Arts. It was set up by IIT professor, Dr. Kiran Seth. I met him when I was 16, and life sort of took a different turn. So it was really a need from the community and from the educational ecosystem that requested us to take this on.
So on another note, I see my grandson. He was a self-taught pianist at the times of COVID, and then he has gone on to become, an expert in coding. He does robotics and also is a Lego master. He's only 8, and now he's become 10. So I see that both sides of his faculties are being used, the left brain and the right brain. How do you see this connection between music and history, between poetry and dance? How do you try to match all this?
Well, firstly, cheers to your grandson. That's true. As I said in my presentation, all subjects are interconnected. The left and the right brain is the entire thesis with Howard Gardner spoke about multiple intelligences. But it's very interesting that even scientifically, if I were to raise my right hand, it's actually my left part of the brain giving me instructions. So we make up these postulates without really not necessarily being. Now, coming to, yes, so in Art Links, again, as I said, there was a need from the community. The connection to poetry and music came. This was a time where the curriculum in India, about 10 years back, had a huge paradigm shift. Environmental sciences was coming in. There were new subjects coming in. The way trigonometry was being taught, there were lots of changes happening. So the educational institutions approached us, and with dance and mathematics, there's a physicality to the entire excitement. So actually, we had a Latin American dancer who taught fractions with dance poses. Bharatnatyam, you could teach geometry with the way you take a pose. So if I were to say a deer ran, I would say that in a direct way. Whereas if I were to do it in Bharatnatyam, the entire movement would change, and I could show it in three, four ways. At a junior level, subtraction and addition became a huge problem for children. They knew the numbers. So sequencing was a problem, but they knew the numbers. So when you do sequencing through musical notes, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, sa, they get it. When you do additions and subtraction to dance, like you form a circle, you have some movements, and you say so-and-so moves out, the connection happens because learning then becomes fun. There's no fear. A huge impediment to learning is the feeling that I'm not getting it. I'm not understanding. And because I'm not understanding, I'm being left behind.
So that brings us to the next question. I see a lot of hands-on learning in Art Links Learning, your platform. I even read that, when the child is two and a half, to teach Sare Gama Padanisa, you take them on musical steps. So how do you incorporate all this? I've seen it in Avid, that when we did our hands-on course on how to become a DJ, 2 or 3 people actually became DJs. So hands-on learning is really, an exceptional part of any learning.
So let's forget Mozart, who wrote his first aria when he was 6. So keeping Mozart out, there is an age appropriateness to curriculum. At a primary level, definitely hands-on education. I think the touch points for us, at least our learning, was that the first 3 months we don't give homework. The musical steps also come in the second segment. The first segment is really about what is sound. In music, it is what is sound. Not all sound is music. Organized sound is music. The unstruck sound is not music. That's the sounds of ambient sounds of the environment. This is the same way art was taught. This is the same way dance was taught. So at a primary level, hands-on experience. I'm sure we've had this huge talk about AI. I mean, I'm with the brigade on the thinking, but I would say I don't think till age 10 we can do away with the teacher. The hands-on learning is imperative.
So nowadays, AI is the most talked about subject, taking a cue from what you just said, and it is all around us. As soon as in our daily lives as well, the first thing we do is open our phone and go to ChatGPT because that is our inspiration, and then we add emotion to it. But to our children, we say, first do your research and then go to any technology. what is your opinion in saying when technology should be given to a child, and why would you say that?
So on this, I must confess, I've taken Buddha's part of taking the golden mean. I'm at the, so in the arts, let me put out a caveat. The journey between the analog and the digital, in a lot of cases, is yet to happen. The digital to digital transformation has been fast, so it's left out a lot of people. So I sit at the intersections. My teachers who taught me all my subjects are well into their 80s, and they say AI is a devil. Right? They're very clear. There is no amount of argument that I can give them to say that AI is not a devil. Being a practitioner and a researcher, I'm not too sure whether I can ignore the voice. I don't know enough about AI, but I know enough to say that whatever little we've used, it's computational power. The library that it opens up to teaching, to our teachers, is enormous. The second example I can give, personalized homework curriculums. The ability to check and not let a child feel alone, isolated. It's made learning, in an age where you have insular families today, it has made learning a little bit more when you have these classrooms, where you're all linked together. For the teachers, I think the biggest advantage that AI has given is hyperdoc. I do try to convince my teachers, I do try to convince my older teachers that today I'm able to, at a drop of a hat, it's a very, very difficult rag in Hindustani music called Darbari Kangra. It's very difficult. It's not something that is taught at the initial years. Today, at a flick of a button, I can get 20 renderings. So it is a tool. I don't think we should ignore it. Now, regarding what age you give it to children, I think that's as personalized as a fingerprint. It depends on at what age do you want to give your son or daughter to drive the car, what age you'd like to give your child a cell phone. I think these are very personal discussions. I don't think we're not seeing a standard right now.
So in FICCI conference last year, you were at the conference, and there was a little bit of a divide between artists who were using analog or traditional methods, and there were artists who were using analog and digital in their compositions. And is there a way to teach these two types of artists different curriculums, because you design curriculums as well?
So actually the curriculum stays universal and same. This was for the audience, I don't know if you remember, Sanjoy Asa, this was Dr. Priya Kanungo. Dr. Priya has learned in the traditional Guru Shishya Parampara. But being a teacher, and primarily during COVID, the responses for learning music or learning an art form, learning baking, learning sewing, had grown so much that the teachers took to the digital platform. We, in fact, in Bangalore, requested Priya, I'd organized a concert for her, where she sang in the analog route, but the entire concert was done through the medium of tech. We had Riya's Studio, an app on her iPad. We had the iTanpura. I don't think anybody in the audience could make a difference. Now, definitely to our teachers, the curriculum remains the same, whether it is digital or hands-on. I know the technocrats will murder me for saying this, but I need to say this. When the teachers are teaching on a digital medium, empirical learnings have shown us that attention span wavers. People keep the computer on and they have left. So the teacher loops back and asks a question. I don't say this in isolation, because if you look at, and this is something I've personally done, tracking history, when you have all these courses on Khan Academy, Coursera, the sign-ups are like 50,000, 20,000, 10,000. The completion is not more than 100. That is my personal fear on the digital media in terms of attention. the attention span. That's the only cautionary note that I would give being in the education sphere.
Sadhana, you have been merging the East and the West, and you are master in both the conservatories, the Brihadhwani and the Kinder Music. Brihadhwani is for online, is an Indian platform, whilst Kinder Music is an international platform which has an online component as well. How do you merge both the conservatories?
So the curriculum that she's referring to is at the primary and the middle school level, but actually it's really morphed to even go up as a music appreciation program. Again, a need was felt from the community that at a primary level and at a mid-school level, you don't know what the inclination is, whether a child is interested in the learner, is interested in instrumental music or vocal music, is interested in a choir, is interested in what form of sound. Now, the human ear is one of the sense organs which gives a toss to gender. Two men can like the same music, two women. It just, any permutation and combination, the ear does not go by its gender. So that's the reason why we clubbed two conservatories for knowledge, one, to understand sound, and this we've done across dance, we've done across art, we've done across, just to give a wide spectrum. And the student then chooses which conservatory, which form they want to go ahead. But I must say, both in music, because that's my area of research has been so deep, the Western classical scale has a certain definitive steps. That's what defines the music there. I think India's biggest contribution to the world of music is its raga theory. We are probably the only country in the world which has twin traditions of classical music. Till the 13th century, there was just one music. Then the split happens during the Bhakti movement, and you have the Hindustani and Carnatic music. So there are a lot of parallels, and my work really has been in the interconnectedness of the arts.
The last question is, Art Links Learning spans the whole horizon and the gamut of teaching from early childhood to teachers training. So how do you cover this whole section and give equal leverage to all of them?
So let me take the latter half first, the teacher training. When somebody studies art or joins Kalakshetra to do dance, or joins A.R. Rahman's Academy to learn music, you do this to be a performer. You don't necessarily do it to be a teacher. So 1 out of 100 we have seen are born teachers. They actually are doing it for a career option. Now we know the way the performing arts, Oliver Sacks has really documented this, 10,000 days to mastering your art. How many really make it? So it's actually post 35, 36 at ArtLinks, we have seen people applying for teaching jobs. Not necessarily our experience when we were running the pilot, our experience has taught us not necessarily they are trained to be teachers. They are performers. In addition to that, they've had a little bit of bitterness because they didn't make it as artists. So the entire curriculum, before we can teach them, we had to actually run specialized B.Ed programs to train the teacher in child psychology. How do you note curriculum? How do you fill a report card? It was as basic as that. So teacher training became the biggest resource because before that we couldn't roll out the curriculum in schools. I think regarding students I've spoken.
Yeah. To sum it all up, what I take from our conversation is that music should be taught to every child from a very early age because it is a language. When a child starts speaking, he doesn't know any language. But music will be his direction, and when he grows up and goes internationally abroad, he will be able to communicate to people even without knowing their language. So with this, would you like to leave a few words for our audience?
Let me give you an anecdote. You know, this is when the curriculum, the pilot was running out, so there is a lot of feedback that you get from the ground. So in one of our flagships schools, I got an alarm from the principal. There was an irate parent who wanted to meet the director of the company. Now, since it was the pilot phase, and I said, every child is important, every parent is important, I said, give me a little downtime and let me address the issue. The issue was this. The child had joined Artling's classes, had done about 12 classes, not more. Finished the class on Tuesday, fell sick, was very happy not to come to school on Wednesday. Thursday morning, forgot, happily pretended to be ill. By Thursday, 12 o'clock, brought the house down because he knew music class was at 2:45. Brought the class down, and the young urban families, you know, the kind of disorientation the child's demand must have created. Irate parents. So I said, let me respond back, give me 48 hours. We had a beautiful MIS system, which if we had completed 3 months, we would have given a report card. But since it was only 12 classes, it's true the child didn't sing. But you know, when I look back through the teacher logs, it's very interesting. And I remember I had given the orientation, and this student had stood up, this little boy had stood up in class 1. The electronic Tanpura has both alphabets and numbers, G sharp, and it gives you the range of the frequency. He questioned me, but my maths and my alphabets are separate. Why have you brought it together? This gentleman, this little boy, his fidelity to sound was astounding. He didn't want to sing. All he would do was, because we had aids, Kinder Music would give us a lot of, systems to play around. He would organize with the teacher. He would realize, and the pitch of children at grade 1 is not broken. So boys and girls can sing together. He would organize, these people should be B flat, those people should be a G sharp. So I told the father, I said, head of Sony in Japan went to music class for 19 years. His parents funded him. He never became a musician, but his fidelity to sound was so good. So that's the magic of the arts. It triumphs at the most unexpected places. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Sadhana. It has been very inspiring, and I hope the audience has understood what you're trying to say.
No, so Sadhana, it was fascinating, but so these kids you're talking about, they start early. Now, I want to know, because I work with vulnerable children and they're 16 and above, no access, no opportunity till now, lots of severe trauma. Can this art, can music help in healing, and or is it too late? Do you have to start at 3 and 4 and 5?
Okay, so our oldest student in the music appreciation classes were 91. So 16
so
is
hope.
Yeah. You'd be actually surprised. So, having worked at two ends of the spectrum, you have, I shouldn't take names, but I can. We're in a friendly audience. Sangeet Research Academy in Kolkata says you're a born singer or you're a born artist. Institutes like Brihadhwani and all say that no, everybody has an artistic and a musical bone in their body, and can either join in a choir, can either join at a base, different levels of. So no, I don't think so. It's a question of getting the right teacher, getting the right tools, and learning. If there is a vulnerability, then the only recommendation I would give is to learn at their pace. The intervention has to be not necessarily from a performance angle as much as it has to be from a participation angle, so this was an old school of thought which said you have to learn when you're 5, when you're 6. No, that's changed. Yeah, a little bit in instrumental music, dexterity of fingers and all, that is easier when you're younger, but you can flip it.
This is purely music for healing.
But don't you think interest plays an important part? because he may be a good percussionist, but not a good instrumentalist.
So the curriculum and the pedagogy is designed such to tickle the interest. You know, it's like what Aditi would have done in the Lavani. You know, we are seeing a full performance, but actually, if you noticed, her leg work was different than what a Bharatanatyam dancer would do. Now, there's a pedagogy, there's a reason why you take the leg like that, because this is high energy. Her footwork was continuous, it was not ending. So there is, you know, pedagogy has a very silent way of enabling. So I may, at 5, I may be interested in the piano, but by 10, I may want to go into a guitar. So that's the optionality that you have to give to the student.
Hi. A very simple question. Rather simply going to put it to you. You spoke so eloquently, I can't match that. But what you did say something to the effect that the year, whether male or female, responds in the same way to music. I tend to disagree with that because I think the female ear and the male ear, even as little children, might be different, no?
Science doesn't show. This is the only sense organ which is gender agnostic. Women, I mean, these are again texts which have been given. Women should not like rock. That's not true. Having worked in this area for about 30-35 years, I can safely say that the human ear actually, it's so at one level it's personalized, and music, like cinema, is an individual and a collective sport, a collective activity. Let me elaborate on my answer. As an art form, no one single person has created music, right? Rhythms have come from Africa, tones from Asia, strings from Europe. So not one, so you may have a saxophone which is created by Adolphe Sax, but no one person has created it, and not one gender has created it. It's a combination of people who have created it. So this is the human ear. I'm sorry, I'm making that case because this is...
No, that's okay, but your answer primarily seems to be about communities, not about personal genders. Like, I would feel a woman has different tastes or responds differently.
So to your point, you're also saying women in plural, which is a community, right?
Yes.
So you're saying all women would like, I would make that statement.
No, not all women like. But when you generalized, or I thought you were generalizing by saying the ear has no gender.
The limited point I'm making, the ear has a gender in terms of decoration, whether you want to wear a earring or not, which today even all genders wear. But in the human ear, I, in my research, have found it is actually gender agnostic. In a group, you can have two people, women and men, liking rock. It need not be all women like rock, or all women like jazz, or all men like jazz. That's the limited point I was making.
Accept.
On a humorous note, usually men are deaf to women's.
That I agree. That I agree. That I won't contest. It's a lovely word called selective hearing, right? It's a word called selective hearing.
Hi, thank you for the insightful remarks throughout the conversation. So the Ministry of Education in South Korea, so they have come up with a plan that they want to implement AI textbooks in the classroom. So the idea is that by 2025, they'll start with science and maths, and by 2028, almost every subject except arts and music would be taught in the classrooms through AI textbooks. So as expected, the parents have actually caused quite a stir and are not ready to accept this program, and they have started taking pretty strong advocacy efforts in this regard, and hence the government has kind of stepped back on that note. So a couple of quick questions. What is your personal take on this implementation program by the government? And secondly, what is your take on implementing AI textbooks in specifically in music and art. So even when they're trying to implement, the last stage reaches out to be arts and music. So how would the learning outcomes be different if the course is being taught by an AI textbook for the students? Thank you.
So as I said, I'm going to put a caveat. I'm not an AI expert, okay? But I think this is an extremely important question that you asked. This is true, it's made world history. That the parents in Korea, this is a diktat taken by the government, and the parents have gone against it. If I were to be honest, I would be on the side of the parents. Because I would say that the jury is still out on AI. Let's wait and watch. So there is a national curriculum, there is a national policy that is coming up on the use of computers. It's too early to say. Yes, I don't disagree with the computational power of AI. I don't. I am not too sure whether it can replace the curriculum and the textbook and the pedagogy. That's one point. What is artificial intelligence? It is something that you train. Where it will work is because the human brain will pick up a rag very well, instantly, if I'm a musician. The AI has to be taught. But once it learns, then the mastery is of a different order. So it can be a tool. So I'm on the side of the parent. Regarding arts and music education, it's so much fragmented as of yet. So first, the pedagogies have all to come together under one umbrella before we can put the transition to the artificial intelligence, and then it goes into dissemination. So, I was speaking to somebody from AI who was telling me the price or the costing of a 30-second soundbite. Now, a Carnatic music concert, which follows a Ragam Tanam Pallavi format, is a 2.5-hour project, is 2.5-hour concert. A 30-second, as I said, I'm dyslexic in maths, so 30-second soundbite, she gave me an astounding cost for that. How would that transport into a 2.5-hour concert? I'm not too sure, I don't have the answer to that. As of now, I'm on the side of the Korean parents who actually moved to reverse. I would say school education, AI can be a tool, it can't replace the teacher or the textbook. That's my take. Again, I'm not the AI expert.
So there's a concept of tacit knowledge.
I'm sorry?
Tacit, T-A-C-I-T knowledge. That is something that is recognized as a kind of relationship that it's master and student, that it's you can't write it down, but it's you, through the experience, through doing it, you learn. And I was also intrigued by, I think he left, Mr. Divya doing the Jodhpur festival. He's here? He was also mentioning that it's for the folk art, like a folk music, the form of art and the livelihood are inseparable. So in your kind of research in art education, anything outside of the objectives of learning the arts as a form of an objective, anything that you identify that they cannot be separate outside of objectives, for example, that it's environment of the classroom or like a kind of relationship of the teacher and the student.
Okay. So if I've understood the question, in classical arts, the way we learned, the way I went to the various schools of learning, it was in a term that we use called the Guru Shishya Parampara, which was where the teacher taught to me. Now that is a privilege. I would rate that. In my case, I had good teachers. So I would rate it as purity of thought. There are enough peers of mine who did not necessarily have that experience. So it's not to say that all teaching in the Guru Shishya Parampara is fantastic. What we particularly have done in arts education is this education format in the classical arts is one-on-one, right? What we've done is we've taken one to many. That is the shift. That is the paradigm shift. Earlier, you went one-on-one. If you wanted to learn arts, you went for a private class. ArtLink's philosophy of teaching has been, it should not be extracurricular. It should be scholastic. When you bring it into the curriculum, when you make it scholastic, then you realize so the environment is large, the exposure is large. You are able to choose, okay, I do 20 subjects, and from this I pick and choose, which is what you do in a normal school. You choose whether you want to go into the discipline of the economic finance, or you want to go into deep sciences, or you want to go into humanities. That's the approach we have taken to answer your question. Both systems work, both systems don't work. By and large, pedagogy doesn't fail. It is the implementation and curriculum that fails. I hope I've been able to answer your question. So one of the interesting things that we've learned is on one-on-one, there is brilliance. On one-to-many, the range of education and learning has expanded, but the brilliance by sheer averages sort of comes down.
But even in the past, there used to be, when there was Guru Shishya Parampara, there was also Gurukul.
Yeah.
So there was both forms of learning.
So that's a system I've not been into, where you, she's right, she's absolutely right, where you went to the teacher's home and you lived with the teacher and you learned. That assimilation was something I do not have any first-hand knowledge about. Yeah. Sanjoy?
Sadhana, you talked about during the Bhakti movement, you had the split and you had the North Indian classical tradition moving away and the Carnatic classical tradition being separate. So can you tell us a little bit about what it was before, and if there was this amalgamation, how is that continued to seep through both traditions? Do you see Carnatic influence continuing in the classical North Indian tradition and the classical North Indian tradition influencing the Carnatic classical tradition? Or was it a complete break and this 500, 600 years has been completely different?
Deep question. Just give me a little time. And maybe another sip of water.
Sanjoy's questions are very deep.
Yeah. So, thank you for asking. It's a deep question. Before the Bhakti movement started actually in the 7th century, there's a misnomer that it started in North, but actually it started in Tamil Nadu. There was a treatise, like the Natya Shastra, you have a treatise called the Sangeet Ratnakar. It is written by a scholar called Sarang Dev. Holds true even today. Sarang Dev sort of brings you the entire music of Hindustan. He was an accountant in the Maratha courts. And the courts were patrons which realized his musical genius and allowed him to document. So the book is called Sarang Dev. Now what happened, it's not isolated only to India. 13th century, look at the world. Renaissance, Reformation is happening in Europe. In India, the rise of the heterodox sects, whether it's Hinduism, have given so much of caste and gender politics that you had the Bhakti and the Sufi movement coming. A little known fact is that the Bhakti and the Sufi movement has given rise to almost 24 forms of music geographically across India. You have the Shabad Kirtan, Amir Khusro, father of the Qawwali, the Sampurn Kirtan in the south, Hari Katha. Each and every locality in India has got a music form which expresses the poetry. This is why, because poets like Kabir, Surdas, Tukaram, Mirabai have challenged the Vedic tradition where the poetry is by a meter. It's a rigid meter, only the Brahmins can chant it. And they are now speaking in the language. So this is the reason why, firstly, these music forms have come. culturally, a huge movement is happening. Renaissance and Reformation separate church music from normal music, which is why today Mozart, Beethoven, Bach can go to 50 countries because they've separated the music. Purandara Dasa in Karnataka is the one who is the father of Carnatic music. This is between the 13th to the 15th century. Purandara Dasa, unlike Reformation and unlike what happens in Hindustani music, Carnatic music is based on deep piety and deep knowledge and veneration of the gods. So it remains in piety. The entire ragam, tanam, pallavi, the varnam, the padam, the niraval, everything is in praise of God. Musicians like T.M. Krishna have taken the Andhra form of the Javali, which is a romantic ballad. That's about the only other than God. Now what happens in the Hindustani tradition? Hindustani traditions, you have the Dhrupad, which was like the Carnatic music, absolutely in bhakti of God. So the fidelity to that music was so high that you just had a sarangi and you didn't even have a tabla player, you had a pakhavaj player. What happens? The Islamic invasion happens and you have music of North India goes like Western Europe and Europe, where it separates. Their church music has separated from pure classical music. In North India, Hindustani music goes through a split. You have Dhrupad, which is your Aminuddin Dagar, Wasifuddin Dagar, Gundeja brothers, and you have Khayal Gayaki, which is imagination, thought, emotions of love, loss, nature, poetry. Quote in praise of king, in praise of human emotions, which is what Vivaldi is doing in Italy at the same time. So in the court of Muhammad Shah Rangile, you have the first Khayal Gayaki expounded, and you have an almost similar thought what Vivaldi does in the Baroque period in Italy. So Carnatic music and Hindustani music, in terms of philosophy, get a split. The points, the comparisons between the two would be, they both have adopted the form of bhajan. And they both have the form of the rag. Now the Hindustani music is a lot like jazz. There is like in jazz they say, you take a scale, you make it wail. Right? You take a scale, you master it and you make it wail. And then the scale sort of comes to you as in when you perform. You can meander, you can come back. Hindustani music does that. There are 10 thoughts which Bhatkande did, which are like the tables. From that you derive the 100 rags. Now, what is Carnatic music done? Carnatic music has a massive configurator called the Melakarta system, the 72 rag note pattern, which is the reason any note anywhere in the world in any form of music can be transported to Carnatic music. Because so in Hindustani, simplest example is Hindustani music has soft notes and higher notes. So you have a Re 1 and a Re 2. Carnatic music you have Re 1, Re 2, Re 3. Hindustani you have Ga 1 and Ga 2. Ga 1 and just Ga. Carnatic music you have a Ga 1, Ga 2, Ga 3. So the broken it to that nanosecond, which is the reason why violin, mandolin. Today you cannot sit for a Carnatic music kacheri without a violin. We don't realize violin is not of Indian origin. The reason it's come, and in classical arts, is because of the Melakarta system. So this, to your point in conclusion, the split happens in philosophy, in the orientation to the text, but they both are based on the raga system.
The entire Avid team, and of course to Asad for making this possible. Thank you to my colleagues at FICCI, British Council, UNESCO, and every one of you who've been here. Thank you very much. And of course to the speakers. A big shout out to the Avid team. Thank you all for not just today, but for continuing to do this day after day. And of course, to Madhu, Ruia for being such a wonderful anchor and commentator today, as well as supporting this initiative. Sadhana, thank you for your Music 3.0. That was really illuminating. Thank you to all our speakers. And see you at the next consultation, which is in Bangalore, October 20th, and then the national conference in Delhi on November 28th. So do block your dates. Look forward to seeing you all.